Hey, this is Nick, CEO of IdeaScale. I'm excited for another episode of Chief Innovation Officer Fireside Chats. Today's guest is Sofia Castillo, the Chief Innovation Officer at Cymerra. Really excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, for sure. It's gonna be a fun conversation.
Perfect. Let's just start out by saying, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what Cymerra does?
Yeah, for sure. I'm Sofia. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer. I have a background in technology, but also I have a background in loving humans a lot. I love the user, and I always love building the best products for them. My background started a bit since I was like 15, just building a bunch of stuff so that we could improve the living in Latin America. Built a bunch of things, exited my last company. That was one of the things we built to improve Latin America. And now I joined the Cymerra team as a co-founder as well. And now what we do in Cymerra, I have both like the business pitch and then the tech pitch. The business pitch is the easy thing. Right now we connect Latin American and Middle Eastern talent with US based companies that have remote openings. We focus on all types of positions, from sales, finance, operations to technology. That's basically the business pitch. And then the technology pitch, and I think that's where the innovation comes, is that we're turning hiring into a fully data driven process. Hiring already is a fully data driven process. It's just that we haven't understood it as such. So we have a lot of manual processes that we could be eliminating, and that's what we're doing at Cymerra. But we'll talk about that later on, most
Sure.
likely.
Let's actually, let me ask about it right now. So I run a software company. I have global employees in 8 different countries, including in Latin America. And I get inbound inquiries for lots of people to join, for me to join this platform or that platform to hire in Latin America or other countries. Each has their own, edge, that they're an AI-driven marketplace, or they have a better matching algorithm, or they have better OCR to read resumes. What is your guys' edge in competing in what I perceive as a reasonably crowded marketplace?
Yeah, well, first of all, congrats on having a very diverse team. Diverse teams are the most resilient teams that I know, and I bet it's really cool
I,
to
lo- I yeah, I was a big fan of just expanding our even customer facing operations to other parts of the world,
and
because
it's
there's just extraordinary talent out there, to be honest, right?
yeah, and it's a great surprise. I think when people have not done it and they start doing it, it's like, what? This existed, and it's at very interesting prices. Wow, that's amazing, and everyone wins. What? That's insane. So yeah, first, congratulations on that, and then the second thing, um, I would say principally one of the things that differentiates us is that we truly focus a lot on the data of the candidates in our platform. Right now, we have 500,000 people that we have pre-vetted with our systems. Our systems evaluate more than 1,000 data points from each candidate, and we make sure we're cross-examining various data points. Why? Because a candidate can say in their resume, like, yeah, I'm a risk taker. And then a system reads the resume and they're like, oh, they're a risk taker. I'm going to match them with this company. But most of the times we don't even know ourselves as humans. That's where the technology comes in. In our platform, once a candidate creates their account, they not only upload resume or written information, but they also perform different types of behavioral video games, for example, where they're put in situations where you need to demonstrate that you're a risk taker, right? And it's all like the science of those video games. It's all behind. Like you don't feel like you're being asked like, oh, are you a risk taker? Take this if you're a risk taker, but you're just put in a position where you have to demonstrate it. And like that, we have other types of psychometric assessments. In that way, we have different types of data points that we can compare to have a more deep dive into the person, who they are and who they say they are. Apart from that, there's other types of data that we collect, but the interesting thing about that is that the candidates in our platform not only give that information, but we also provide them immediate market feedback. So most of our candidates are continuously receiving market feedback, so they're very, very updated on what the American market is requiring or requesting. So for example, one of the cool things is that if most of our clients are hiring sales representatives and they are all using X platform. I'm not going to promote any platform here, but they're all using X platform. Then immediately the system will be like, hey, if you want to get hired, like you should be using the X platform. So whenever they get candidates, they always tend to have the most recent and most updated technologies and skills, because we're constantly feeding the system. It's not just a one-way thing. It's not just like, oh, come in and we'll just present you to the client. It's an integrated system that's continuously feeding back the clients and feeding back the users. And of course, that accelerates the matching. But I would say for me, that's one of the most fun parts, how thoroughly we study our candidates.
So fun personal story on that. Once upon a time, I used to have on my resume that I could program Fortran, which you may or may not know is a language that's been more or less dead for 20 or 30 years. There's still some software written on it. So I actually got the live human feedback from someone who's hiring me that, hey, Nick, this is a useless skill. You should take it off.
For example.
So apparently your tools do. So let's zoom out for a second. So you mentioned some of the uniqueness about Cymaera's technology approach. But as we think about the talent matching or talent acquisition market overall, what are the themes or innovations that are happening broadly across the market? Not just you guys. Is it just, hey, everyone's using AI, or what other innovations are happening as you look across the talent matching or talent acquisition landscape?
Yeah, for sure. So I think you mentioned some of them, right? There's a lot of AI tools already, a lot of them that are outsourced that can be used to read resumes. So like you can put a resume in and it will read it, and you can say like, oh, find me these keywords in this resume. Those are some of the common ones. Keyword matching technologies. But then there's different types of technologies like one-sided interviews, which is something we also have in Cymaera, which is you no longer have to have an HR representative asking the 10 same questions to the 100 candidates that like 90% of those you won't even like. So one-sided interviews is just like, we can now generate the questions for you, we can ask them for you, and we can now make follow-up questions. Depending on which technology you use, some are more advanced, some are less advanced. But basically, like what we're doing is accelerating the repetitive processes so that no one has to focus on those types of things. So that's another one that's pretty cool, because everyone does it and everyone wastes time in that. And also candidates. I think one of the things I love about Cymaera and what we do is that we not only think about the clients and saving them time, but we also think about the user and saving them time and continuously feeding them back. So I think continuous market feedback is one of the technologies. And I'm trying to think like things outside of Cymaera. But I would say most of them are focused on, okay, we have this very long repetitive process. Let's eliminate most steps or delegate most steps to technology. One of the things I like to say is that right now, artificial intelligence is really good or can be really good at processing data. So asking the question like, what in the processes I make in HR in my company are just about processing data, like reading data, evaluating data. So those types of things, like processing data is important, but also like giving back feedback or giving back responses to users. I think that's an easy one in terms of like automation has been around for a while. So you can just automate all the responses, all the feedback, all the follow-ups. You no longer will need to have a person following up with users with a CRM. There's many tools out there. I think the beautiful part about building a company is truly knowing how to integrate all the technologies that already exist and only developing things that you think will make a difference so that those technologies are enhanced even more for your company and of course for the client.
I 100%. Again, as we're a pure play software company, and I always hate the idea of repeating a tool instead of just saying, "Hey, we can use that or copy it." Right? In some cases,
it is a waste of time because you could be thinking of differentiators and you could be thinking of user experience for your clients and treating them better and loving them better instead of like just spending a lot of time doing something that's already done.
Yeah, if somebody's built a great software or a great car it doesn't have to be software. It can be a great car. There's no point in me redoing it, no matter how brilliant I may be. It's just not worth it. Somebody's done a pretty good job, right?
Unless you're gonna like, for me, one of the key points to evaluate is that if you're gonna make something different. Like, is there a problem that has not been solved by the?
Of course, yeah. I'm referring to repeating the exact same thing just because I think I can do it. That's a giant waste of time. So let's jump to a slightly different direction. So you have the title Chief Innovation Officer. Right now, about I think it's 7% of the Fortune 500 companies have a chief innovation officer, and that means 93% don't.
Mhm.
Why is it that your organization felt that it was important to have someone with the title chief innovation officer, and what does that mean at your organization?
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation. And I think both approaches kind of work. Some companies have innovation as the standard building of a company. Like, for example, a lot of tech startups in the Bay Area, I am in San Francisco, their whole business is to change continuously and to integrate and build the next thing, which is really cool. And so a lot of their departments always just maintain the mindset of that, but they're not replicating some things that already work necessarily, which for some businesses work. But then there are other businesses where it's really good to continue doing and replicating the things that already work, but you do want to have that side that's continuously observing the world, bringing feedback from the world into the company, and doing experiments. For me, the chief innovation position is a lot about experimenting and like failing a lot. The department of innovation for me, how I think about it and how I've seen it in a lot of companies, I've built a lot of innovation departments in other companies before having this position. It's very interesting to think of a company like, okay, 80% just keep doing what works, but then 20% just try things that have a lot of chance to fail. So then you have both things. So I think the cool thing about having a chief innovation officer is that it's a department fully focused on experimenting, failing, and the things that work, we pass them to the core product. The things that don't work, we just keep playing. It's a bit like, for example, I think Google has X Moonshot. Maybe they don't have an innovation department, but they do have a place where they can just test really strange ideas that don't sound like they make sense, but then eventually they create really cool things. So as a summary, it's that, like, I think both approaches work. In our case, we do like to separate the playing and experimenting and failing a lot from the replicating of things that already work.
And the follow up to that is, do you have a point of view on what types of organizations should have that dedicated innovation department versus just say it's part of their core business culture?
Yeah, so for example, when I first started looking into innovation in companies, I did this for a company in Latin America where they are a $1 billion company, I think more. They have a very traditional business and it works. And it works, like they generate a lot of money. But at the same time, they know that the world is changing and they know that they want to continuously adapt. But they don't want to distract the things that are already working from the things that could be potentially. So the reason why we developed a department in that company at that time was because we did want to have that space for playing, experimenting, testing things that worked went into core. So I would say that that's a good example, like companies that already have things that work, that the focus is good there, but you want to play around for a second before integrating. Now, for the other types of companies, I think, for example, right now with the current state of technology, you can build some types of businesses that are very small teams, like you're just two people and you have a very specific approach of just uh, innovating. Like the job is to innovate. Like the business objective is not like, oh, to provide this service and attend this user, but it's like, hey, let's just create something really new. So then your job is to create something really new. It's like R&D a bit. I think about it like that. That some businesses or some companies or some startups, let's say it better, some startups are work like R&D, like their research and development, right? So
And it's not just startups, to be fair, right? I have some major pharmaceutical clients that are $100 billion companies, and they have to innovate because when their patents run out, and not just on not just on the pharmaceutical side, or the R&D side, but they need to innovate because their competitors catch up pretty quickly.
and they say, for example, the pharmaceuticals, they replicate things that work and they have a department that's focused on innovation. Or do you think they're more like the type of business that's just like?
So it depends on the type, right? So just talking about the large pharmaceuticals, almost all of them have significant R&D departments where they have billions of dollars coming towards new products
Yeah.
because they know that their patents are going to run out after 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
And so if they're drugged, and so if they're not inventing new molecules, new patents, new medicines,
Yeah.
then they don't have a business anymore. Their business dies every 10 years, literally, in the pharmaceutical industry.
And I think that's a great analogy for most big businesses. If they don't innovate, they will die. right? So they need to have that department.
So there's an old who was it? The CEO or the founder of either Intel or IBM, I always forget who it was, had the joke or the statement that only the paranoid survive in the world of business,
Yeah.
because somebody's catching up to you, and it's maybe somebody who's famous across the street, or maybe somebody you've never heard of who wants your profits, your success.
Yeah, and I just want to add something to that, because I think that sometimes people think that chief innovation officers just have to do with technology or R&D of like new patents, but sometimes innovation, and for a company it's like that. Sometimes innovation is also about, let's always have a big map of what the company is, and let's innovate to find inefficiencies, right? Like maybe there's inefficiencies in the system, because how I think about it is a company is a system. So we're finding inefficiencies in the system, and we can continuously upgrade the operation system, the sales system, like how we speak to our users. There's innovation that can happen in like across all the company, not only in technology, not only in patents, it's also in process. We should always, that's my belief, we should always be looking at the map of the company and tweak whatever is necessary, whatever small tweaks that can generate like 10x differences. And there are many times that's a thing in companies.
So my last guest, actually, he's the chief innovation officer of a trucking and logistics company in India, and he and I were joking. He's not inventing a better truck or a better ship or a better plane or a better train. All the innovation in his industry happens. How quickly can different departments talk to each other and interpret data, because that is how much more quickly they can react to the customer, because they're not going to build a better plane or a better train, right? Their innovation is all internal communication process, which is really basic, but so important, because that's where all the losses happen in their system.
Yeah, and it's what differentiates your company in the end. Like what came to my mind was the McDonald's example, that their innovation was not like in the meat or whatever. Their innovation was on where the person was standing in the kitchen. And that's about mapping how the current system is and how we can continuously be aware of changing it. And I would like to say something about that. Like I do think that the fact that the innovation is separate from core business, for me, is important, because when you're already inside the operations, you sometimes get so used to what is that you forget that things don't have to continuously be what they are. So being a bit outside of that core and looking from afar gives you that third perspective of like, oh, what's that? Like you've been seeing that all day, but like you have not realized that if we just move this, the whole company can be generating way more returns, for example.
You're absolutely right. In fact, I spent the first half of my career in large companies, and there was some academic research that I think the MIT Sloan School of Business put out, that hiring executives from outside your company tended to do a much better job at improving performance than just promoting from within. Even though it's culturally, you want to reward people for their loyalty, turns out for the business, getting somebody who is not thinking about things the same way is actually better. So one final question.
Because I think, because I have my thoughts about that, but I think having it be inside and out, both inside and outside, it's also very powerful, because then you can touch everything, know everyone, but at the same time have that third perspective. But yes, go for your next.
I have one final question. Okay, so.
Yeah.
And you can answer either for your company or in general. So there's a chief innovation officer who's running experiments, coming up with new things, whether it be new products or internal processes. How do you measure innovation? Like, how does your CEO or your board sit down and say, Sophia, you did a good job, or your department did a good job? Did you innovate? How do you guys measure innovation?
Oh, that's cool. I think because of how I see innovation is all about, for me, scientific experimentation. So you have a hypothesis and you want to prove it or disprove it, right? So whenever you do a scientific experiment, you need to determine which variables of the experiment will mean that something should move forward or something should be right, rethought. So for every single experiment, the metrics can change, I would say. So that is, I would say, within now, like thinking about board, I think the important thing is that innovation should be aligned to the core metrics of the company. Like, for example, if the core metric of your company is, let's say, for the technology of Cimera, is to speed up and increase the accuracy of a match. Let's say that that's the variable. If that's the variable and the goal of the company, then innovation should also have the same metric. Like whatever it is that I'm doing should be adding to that percentage. If not, it's like we need to be continuously killing experiments or adding up experiments. But I think that that's very important, and that's a very interesting science and art, when to kill an experiment and when to continue, knowing that maybe it's just need to take more time. And that's a day-to-day learning that you get. But I think I would say that to those two things within the innovation department, it's about identifying the key metrics of each experiment, and then in general, as in like the department within the company, it's about it having an impact the core metrics of the business. That's it.
Just on a personal note, I love that you use the experiment and scientific analogy. I'm a physicist by training, so when I talk about running experiments and getting getting negative results, which is actually fine, you learn something when you fail.
Yes.
It's certainly an unusual way to talk about things in business, because in many business company organizations, only successes count, whereas in science, you learn from your the negative results. So perfect. That was my last question. Is there anything else you want to mention or chat about as we wrap up today's episode?
No, I think I love innovation in the sense that the things that we create are always malleable and they can always improve. So it's always important to ask ourselves the question of like, am I being open to change for the better of the company, or am I closing because I'm scared that change can slow us down? And I always like to bring that curve of innovation, right? I don't know if you've seen it. You've probably seen it. I think it's a meme or something, but innovation happens in like, okay, you're here and then you start to innovate and you fall. Like there's a lot of feels like wasted time, failed experiments and whatnot. But within those 10 experiments, let's say you find the thing that works, and then your business can go like 10x in the next second. So innovation always looks like this.
Yeah, it's the J curve of change. You see it in a lot of things. You see it in population growth curves. You see it in business transformations, a couple of other things. But yes, very familiar with it. It's something that we spent way too much time learning on business school when they could have just showed us the letter J and moved on.
But I think that's just a good mindset to have in mind. Like, am I taking decisions right now out of wanting this company to improve, or am I taking decisions out of fear of the process that would entail? So yeah, that's all I would say. Like, it's very fun to fail when you know you're doing it for the right reasons.
And as long as the cost of failure is not catastrophic. Perfect. Thank you so much, Sophia. Again, the Chief Innovation Officer of Samara. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, for sure. It was fun.